Welcome to part 3 of my travel series for tips for traveling the low countries. This one's about train travel. With the Schengen area, it is very easy to pass over the border without any kind of passport controls. There are some things to keep in mind, though, if you're going to use the trains to get around in Europe. There are several different types of trains. There are trains that are allowed to cross international boundaries, make very few stops. These are called the Intercity Express or ICE. There used to be other versions of it, but that's all that's left because I've been traveling in Europe for 25 years. Um, those particular tickets you can buy, and they will carry you from your first destination to your final destination. They, however, come with a premium price. The reason for this is because of two things. Number one, fewer stops, which means you are paying for the privilege of arriving early. Number two, you're also paying for the privilege of not having to actually get out when you reach a border, buy another ticket, and get on another train. So I did most of my travel based out of Maastricht, Netherlands, which is on very near the Belgian border. And frequently the trains would go just over the border, either to Germany or Belgium. And then that particular train would stop, and then I would have to get on another train. And it's not a super big problem for me because I know about the train travel and I speak French and German well enough to get around and read the screens and the signs. But I did when I got to Liège and did have to go up from the train to the overhead, go down another into the terminal, go all the way to the almost the exit of the train station to find the machines to buy a new ticket to go from Liège to Bruges. So I had to buy two different tickets, one to get into Belgium and then one to get around in Belgium. And so if you don't know how to do that or you're trying to catch a tight time frame, then it becomes a problem. The nice thing about those is it's for any train that is in that category. Typically speaking, when you buy an intercity express, you are buying one for a particular time. Um, this is particularly relevant if you're traveling in countries like France, where because you're traveling on a specific train at a specific time, the price will change dramatically. I know this is a segue, but 2 years ago when I was in France, coming back from Saint-Malo, I was only able to get to Saint-Malo because I wasn't staying there the night before, or maybe it was 2 nights before I was coming back to Paris. And by then, to get on the trains that I wanted that would get me to Paris on time, they were mostly full, so I had to pay a premium price. So I think it cost me 50 euros to go from Paris to Saint-Malo because I left Paris when I arrived on the last train out of town, which I think was 7:15 at night, and got to Saint-Malo just before 10 o'clock. But when coming in, I had to pay over 100 euros to get back in. And that's a lot of money to go from Britannia to Paris. That's one way. But it's because you're buying a specific time, space on a train, and space is limited, and that's when you're on it. I was able to get a seat, so that was fine. With the regional trains, then you can get on any regional train. And this was important because when I went to Trier from Luxembourg, the first train I was on actually stopped before Trier. So I had to get out and then get on the next train that came, which was 20 or 25 minutes later, to finish the rest of the route to get to Trier. And because it's the same train, same category of train, there was no problems with it. It had an obvious validation time for the day, and I had not, overstayed somewhere. The nice thing about it is because of that, you can also get out somewhere, spend an hour or so there, and then get on the next train and then keep going if you decide you want to make an extra stop. So it has that flexibility too, and it's a lot cheaper. When I rode the train from Maastricht to Aachen, and in Aachen, the machine wouldn't sell me the ticket. It wouldn't take my card, so I had to go to the counter, this is how I learned this. And there, she sold me the regional train ticket, and in German, because I speak German fluently enough that I didn't need to speak any English with her, even though I'm pretty sure she knew I was an American. But she was able to buy that, and I verified with her it was for any train running, and it was good for 24 hours. So that was a benefit. So you had some flexibility, and it's cheaper. But the train stops more frequently, so it takes longer to get from Maastricht to Cologne than it would have if I had been able to get on the Intercity Express, because I think it only made one stop. It stopped in Aachen and then it stopped in Cologne. But between Aachen and Cologne, there were, I don't know, 4 or 5 stops. Not a super big deal if you're not in a rush, especially if you want to save money. So if you aren't familiar with the languages, if you're not comfortable, if you don't want to deal with the hassle with this, then what I recommend is that you download any of their apps for the particular train lines. If you're traveling in and out of Germany, for example, get Deutsche Bahn and buy your tickets through there. They have an English version, so you can buy it, and you just show it. And because you have the app, they won't probably even talk to you because they've got what they needed. They'll just scan. There's a QR code on your ticket, and they'll scan that, and that will be sufficient for your travel. And the conductor won't even engage in you unless you don't have it when he comes by, he or she comes by. But you'll see everyone else getting theirs out as well. Now, when you have the ticket that's loaded in there, you can buy it digitally. It's in there, and there's no hassle. You don't have to get off the train when you cross the border to buy another ticket. Because last 2 years ago, when I went to Krakow, Wien, Prague, Berlin, I had a Austrian Österreichische Bundesbahn from Krakow to Wien. We went through the Czech Republic. I had to change trains. So that doesn't necessarily guarantee that you don't have any other hiccups. And it wasn't on the marquee, so I had to actually go into the station and ask, which is fine because they spoke German there. I wasn't the only person that was looking for it. There was another woman and her kids who were also looking for, where's the train to Vienna? Because the train we originally were on was going to Budapest, and I was not going to Budapest. I was going to Vienna. So it's a lot further south than I was really looking to go, along a different route as well. So there are some other hiccups, but as far as your ticket is concerned, I bought an OBB ticket and was able to go without having to get off and buy another ticket. I did have to get off and change trains. Same thing when I went to Berlin. I had a Deutsche Bahn from Prague to Berlin. So from Prague to Berlin, when I crossed the border, I didn't have to get off the train and buy a new ticket. In fact, I didn't have to get off the train at all. It was a Deutsche Bahn train. I got on the Deutsche Bahn train in Prague, rode it to Berlin. It stopped at 3 or 4 stops, and then we were done. And it goes to a main train station, the main train station. So if you have an Intercity Express, then you'll end up at the main train station. So these are some things to keep in mind if you're willing to do that to make your life easier. There's the apps. The apps will buy Intercity Express tickets. You won't have to get out. You won't probably even have to talk to anybody, probably. But it does have a specific time and a specific train. So if you miss it, then you might have to buy a whole new ticket, especially on Deutsche Bahn, because the Germans are not very tolerant of that at all. Even if you are obviously not a native and this is your first time in Europe, they are particularly intolerant of you being on the wrong train. Now, that being said, when I was on this trip, there was someone who was thrown off a train every day. There was someone who got on a train either without a ticket at all or who got on a ticket that was one way and was going back and was hoping no one would notice. They were all people who had no IDs. They were all people who were not from there. They weren't necessarily tourists like I am because I do carry my ID with me, especially if I'm going across international boundaries. But they threw someone off the train every day that I was on the train. Every day, one of them was a German girl who was just hoping to not get caught, who pretended to be an American, which I thought was hilarious. You are not an American. I know what we sound like when we speak English. So anyway, those are some things to keep in mind. There's nothing wrong with traveling by train in Europe, but there are some considerations. I do recommend it if you go to Luxembourg, as long as you stay inside of Luxembourg, because their public transportation is free, cheap, and efficient. Oh, one other thing that brings up, because I mentioned Luxembourg, sometimes they'll do replacement buses. The week after I was in Luxembourg, as I saw the signs, I didn't understand everything because my French isn't good enough for that. So I asked the conductor on the train. He said, oh, no, they're doing work on the tracks next week, so there'll be replacement buses. So instead of on a train, they will take you by bus. Longer. They can't actually be on the tracks. They're on the other side of the station from the tracks, usually, and you'll have to get a bus. But there will be signs up for that all over the place, or if you have the app, it will notify you of that as well. So those are some things to keep in mind. But if you go to Luxembourg, get on the train, get out of town, go see some of the other villages. It won't cost you anything. They're really clean and pretty, and they're free since 2021, I think. So anyway, some tips for traveling in Europe based on my recent experience in the Low Countries. Godspeed. Good luck in your travels.